Hey, what's up, everybody? This is PSP, Black, Sophisticated, and Prosperous, and I'm living well here in Japan. Now, I have been living on and off in Japan for almost 4 decades now. And me and my family recently moved back to Japan a year ago, over a year ago, actually, in June of 2023. I retired as a software engineer last year, and upon retirement, I decided that I wanted to move back to Japan. Well, it was in the works anyway. Um, I always wanted to live in Japan, and this time I'm not leaving. This is my third time living here. But I'm going to touch base on why I had to make these moves. And you yourself will probably go through similar experiences. But my experience now has turned out to be the best that I can ever imagine. And I'm living really well here in Japan now. But today's topic, besides introducing myself and what this channel is going to be about, is I'm also going to talk about how you will never get rich in Japan. You never will. But you can live well. Yes, so if you think you're going to come over here and get yourself all set up and all of a sudden, you get a good job and you go start, thinking you're going to get the riches and everything, that's not going to happen in Japan. Japan is not that kind of country. Okay. I'm an American, born and raised in the United States. Just moved from the United States. I was living in the Pacific Northwest, and it's a very expensive area. I was living a good life with my family. I have a wife and two young children. My wife is from Japan. I met my wife in the Pacific Northwest, in the Seattle area, where I was living when she took a break from college, and she came over for an English program, and that's where we met. So the rest is history. We've been married now almost 17 years. So fast forward now, here I am living in Japan with my family. We just recently moved back here last June. And I'm loving it here in Japan. I'm living really well. But it hasn't always been the case for me in Japan. My first experience was when I was stationed in the Air Force. Just a moment, I got people behind me, so make sure that I get some privacy. So, my experience, my first experience was when I was stationed in the Air Force back in Kadena Air Base in Okinawa. And when I got there in 1985, it was I remember it was very hot, and the economy was hot in Japan too. That was right smack dab in a bubble. Japanese were spending money like left and right. They were buying expensive bags, expensive clothes. They were getting they were getting homes built with more luxuries in them, buying a lot of luxury items. And here I was, a serviceman that wasn't making as much money. The day I got to Japan, it was 250 yen to the dollar. And then the dollar crashed down to 120 yen later that year. And of course, the military pay didn't keep up with the dollar yen exchange rate as quick as it needed to be. And for the 7 years I lived in Okinawa, I found myself living as a lower working class person. I did, when I was there, however, start an English school, which lasted 5 years before I left. And I was able to supplement my income that way. It did elevate my life a little bit, but still, I think I was very fortunate because a lot of Japanese at the time had a lot of money to spend on English classes, even though I didn't charge much for my English classes, because my whole thing was, look, I'm not going to charge you guys as much. So a lot of people took my classes, and so I got lucky in there. Now, so let's fast forward to another time I lived in Japan when I was in Osaka. I lived in Osaka for almost 3 years, and before that I was living in a place called Mie Prefecture, where I worked for a year. I worked like a dog for a Japanese company. And when you first get to Japan, and everything is new and fresh, because see, for me, I always wanted to live in mainland Japan. And I was stationed in Okinawa, and I only had been to mainland Japan like once when I went to Misawa Air Base. And I just didn't get the experience that I wanted to get the full time. I had a wonderful time in Misawa, but I didn't get the experience that I wanted to get. I really wanted to live in mainland Japan. I remember when I was in the Air Force, I put my assignments in. I was like, I really want to go to mainland, but they sent me to Okinawa, which is where I didn't want to go, because there was way too many military there, and I didn't want to be around military all day. So anyway, so I got out the Air Force and I went to live in the Northwest Seattle area, in Seattle actually, and I got bored. I was there for 2 years. I had a temporary job, and then I went back to school. I went to grad school there, trying to get me another degree, because I thought that was going to help me out. And then I saw that a lot of people wasn't really getting jobs just because they got a master's degree. You wasn't automatically getting a job, right? So I said, you know what? I'm just going to go to Japan like I always went to. And I came to Tokyo, and this was in '94, and I gave myself 2 weeks to find a job. And I remember getting in Tokyo, and I stayed at this place called the Kimi Ryokan. So for all you people that want to come to Tokyo, I highly recommend the Kimi Ryokan. It doesn't cost much. It's a really good place. The price has not changed much since '94. I had a wonderful time there. I met some great friends there, some good expats, because we were all expats staying there. So I'm just walking around here in the shade in my park. I'll tell you where I'm at in a minute, just to keep cool here, because it's really hot in Japan. Trust me, it's hot. But anyway, so I get there, and like I said, I gave myself 2 weeks to find a job. I found a job in 3 days on a billboard. It was this company out of Nagoya. Well, they were actually out of Owase, but they said Nagoya, and I think they wanted to kind of attract foreigners to their company by saying they were out of a big city, because at that time it was nice being an expat in Japan. You can get paid really well teaching English, and so at that time I think the yen rate was like about 90 yen to the dollar or something like that, and they were paying from the start like 250,000 yen. So you do the math, that was pretty good money at the time, and you don't have to make that much money to live in Japan anyway, right? So anyway, so I get to Nagoya, and the guy interviewed me, and I spoke just a little bit of Japanese at the time, but he's like, hey, you can speak some really good Japanese, and he was all impressed, and I was like, okay, yeah, but you're hiring me to teach English. So I remember getting back to the States, and I was packing up my stuff to move, and then I get a phone call from Japan. I was like, oh, this is call from Japan. And it was the guy that interviewed me, who happens to be the director of the company I was going to teach with. And he said, look, we have a position available in Matsuzaka, which is about an hour from Nagoya. I think it was a little bit more than that, but that's what he said, by train. And we want to know if you want to become a man. We're gonna make you. He didn't ask me. He said, we're gonna make you a manager of an English teaching team. And I was really looking for like the bright lights and the big city life, and all the amenities and the girls and everything. This is what I wanted. I mean, this is the Japan that I come to love from, because I never really got to experience it to the full extent like a lot of guys did in the 90s when they were living actually in mainland Japan. Like I said, I was in Okinawa fighting amongst other GIs for women, and but I knew when I went to mainland, those 3 weeks in Misawa, man, I was able to meet a lot of girls up there, and that was just a big taste, and put a nice taste in my mouth. So that's what I was looking for more of doing. But he talked me into going to Matsuzaka. So I went to Matsuzaka, and then I found myself, managing a staff and also doing demo lessons for the school. So what they would do, they were actually headquarters out of a place called Owase in Miyaken, which is a really small town. But like I said, we were out of the Matsuzaka office. They had offices everywhere. Matsuzaka, they had one in Issei, they had one in little villages. So they had schools in those places. They had an office in Matsuzaka, but they had schools all over Mie Prefecture, and they had the one big school up in Nagoya. So I was, like I said, teaching at Masaka. I would go to the headquarters once in a while. And then after a while, they wanted to use me for demo lessons. So my regular lessons for myself and my children would start, because I taught kids and up to adults. But they would start in the afternoons from Monday through Friday, 5 to 9 o'clock at night. And so, but before that, there would be a guy coming up from Owase, and he would pick me up. He would just come right in my house, in my apartment, and he'd park himself there. I'd give him some coffee and everything, and then we'd leave, and we'd get on the 5:30 train from Matsuzaka Station to either Kyoto that day or Nara, or anywhere in the Kansai region that required some demos. And sometimes we talked to like 2 or 3 Jukucho senseis, which means like school prep school owners is what they were, prep schools. And they were trying to sell some kind of machine at the time, and they were trying to make me give a demo of how you can integrate your English teachers with this machine or whatever, or whatever I forgot what it was in general, but that's what they wanted me to do. So I would do that, and then I would get back to Matsuzaka about 3 in the afternoon, and then I would have to turn around and get myself prepped up for my classes, walk to the office from my house, and then we had our cars parked there that the company would provide for us, and then I'd have to drive to like little villages, a place called Taki Village or Tamaki Cho, or like Issei City, which is one of my favorite cities in Mie. It is my favorite city in Mie Prefecture. And then I'd teach my classes, and then my day would be over, and I'd get back to the office, and then I'd walk back home, and end up not being back home until like 10:30 at night, and then have to turn around the next day, wake up at 4 in the morning, and get ready for this next trip. So I pretty much was putting in about 16-hour days, almost the entire year I was with that company. Now that was at first it was nice. I was like, yeah, I'm doing really well. I'm enjoying this. It's okay. This is the life in Japan. This is the way it is. Okay, so I guess I'm going to be part Japanese now. Is the life. But I remember the owner of the company telling me when we used to go down to Owase on weekends sometime. He'd invite us down for parties and whatnot, because it was a real close-knit company. It was a small company, but it was real close-knit. And he'd invite us down there, and then one day he told me and a group of staff, he said, English speak teachers, he said, I want to tell you guys something here. You will never get rich in Japan. And he stopped there. He didn't say you would live well. He just said, you will never get rich in Japan. Because I think I had brought something up. I said, hey, yeah, I came here. I'm going to teach. I'm going to save money. I'm going to build my wealth. And he said no. And you know what? 30 years later, I can attest to that. You won't get rich here in Japan. And so if you're coming over here and you thinking that you're going to be like highly successful, and you may be successful. You may be successful. You have a chance to be successful. But if you're going to work for a Japanese firm and get paid in Japanese yen, you're not going to get rich. The best way to live in Japan is to get paid in dollars, okay, which is a strong currency right now. Now, granted, with the yen rate being almost 160 yen to the dollar now, I think the last I checked was like 156 yen to the buck, which is amazing. Don't get comfortable with that figure, because the number will not stay that way forever, because the yen is a fluctuating currency. It is no longer locked in like it was for years at the 360 rate after the war. The yen will move up and down, and I don't know what the lowest it's ever been, but I've heard somewhere like it's 70 yen to the dollar at one point. I know when I lived in Japan and when I was teaching, it was like, I remember being 89 yen to the dollar. And I was like, yeah, and I went on vacation to Hawaii, and trust me, I was living good with that rate. I was able to travel. Now, I want to say one thing here. I think I might park myself in this little shady spot. I really like this little bridge. And I'll tell you, like I said, I'll tell you where I'm at here in a few. But let me just say something here. I said you need to get paid in dollars, but you know what? You can also get paid in yen. Now, getting paid in yen, you won't be able to, travel as much as you like overseas. And if you're an American, you won't be able to just jump on a plane and go home and act like you're rich, because you won't be. Because the yen rate is weak against the dollar. And in America, it's a very expensive country. Trust me. I lived in Washington State. That was one of the most expensive states to live in. Fortunately for me, I was a software engineer, so I was able to make pretty good coin. But not a lot of people can say that, especially with this demographic. They don't hire that many of us in IT, right? So Wow. So, but you can, if you can live well in Japan. Like, remember this, I'm telling you, I'm calling this, you won't get rich in Japan, but you can live well in Japan. Okay, as long as you are comfortable with your environment. So, and what I mean by comfortable is I mean that, okay, I've seen videos out there on Japan. There's a few videos I watch. I watch YouTube videos quite a bit on Japan, and I see what people are talking about, and then I might make some comments. I might agree or disagree with what they're saying, and you know, I respect what everybody's putting out there. You can say whatever you want to say. Of course, it's a free world. You have your free. You coming from your experience, but I'm coming from my experience, and so I mean, I see a lot of these people doing videos from cities like major metropolitan areas like Kansai or Tokyo or Kobe or Osaka or whatever. And like I said, I've lived in Osaka. I lived in 4 prefectures in this country: Okinawa, Mie Prefecture, Osaka, and now I'm living in Niigata. And right where I'm at, by the way, to let you know, I'm here at this beautiful park, Takata Castle Site Park in Joitsu City, where I live. It's a beautiful place. It's a city of about 181,000 people last I checked. And that was like last week, trust me. And it's just a wonderful place to be. It's very peaceful. We're not crowded with tourists. I mean, this park I'm standing in, though, it was packed in April because we do have one of the biggest cherry blossom festivals in the nation, and we have one of the 3 best night sakura, they call yozakura, night cherry blossom viewings in the world. And trust me, with 4,000 plus trees in our park here, yeah, it's a lot. Trust me. I mean, everything you see is sakura. So, but what I'm getting at is this. The reason why I'm bringing up the different geographical area, talking geographically here in Japan, is you're going to get a different experience depending on where you live. Now, where I live, and like I said, I can attest to everything because I've lived in 4 different prefectures in 4 different ways, right? So when I lived in, for example, when I lived in Osaka and Mie, I didn't have a car. Although I had access to a car in Mie, I mean, they were really strict. They didn't let me drive it around when I was off, even though I did one time. But in Osaka, I didn't have a car. I didn't need a car because the public transportation in the major cities is so good. But now that I'm living in Niigata, I do have a car. But what I've seen on a lot of these YouTube videos, a lot of these people that are speaking on YouTube, they don't have cars. So I'll give you an example. There was one guy whose video I watched. I'm not going to mention anybody's name. If they ever watch my video, they'll know who I'm talking about. And he was walking past a Japanese house. And he was saying, "Oh, Japanese homes are like, look at it. It's just small and cramped and everything." See, it was a nice looking house, but it was just small and cramped. And this is a guy that's been living in Japan for over 30 years, right? Well, you know, yeah, I did see the small and cramped home, but I myself am getting a house built here in Japan that is almost as big as the house I had in Washington State in America. My wife and I, we're getting a home built here. I bought land. I'm a landowner in Japan. And so to let you know a little bit about how that came about is my father-in-law is from the city that we live in, that I chose to live in. He, at 18, when he finished high school, he joined the Japan Air Self-Defense Force, and he went on to live all over Japan, and he ended up in Niigata City, where my wife is from, and she was born and raised, and where he met his wife, of course, my wife's mom, right? So his father passed away more than 20 years ago, but he had hand built this house that was on the property. He hand built the house about 63 years ago. 61 years ago. And so I remember the first time when I seen that property, I was like, "Oh, that's a nice little spot," because it's right down the street from the birthplace of skiing in Japan. I can walk up the hill in like 10 minutes. I'm at the birthplace of skiing, and then you see all the ski hills and whatnot. So it's in the foothills of the city. So I fell in love with it the first time I saw it, but I didn't know what he was going to do with it. And then because he had 2 properties at the time, so I finally reached out to him a few years ago. I said, "Hey, you know what? I'm interested in that property." They were so emotional. They were so happy that I wanted to keep the property in the family. Make a long story short, last year he ceded it over to my wife and I last September after we moved here in June. I had already bought a lot next to the land, so now we have a bigger lot so we can build a bigger house. Tore the house down in October, and now from the beginning of July, they're building our new house. So I come from a different perspective. Like I said, I see these videos on YouTube, and I see a lot of people living average or talking about wanting to go back to their respective countries this and that and the other, and that you know you can't live well here and there and whatever, but you can live well in Japan. I am a testament to that, and I will do a lot of videos. Of course, this is my first one that I'm doing on this, and you will see what I'm talking about. You know, so because what has happened is a lot of those guys that have been here that long, like as long as they have, and by the way, you can tell it's really humid out here today. Yes, we're sweltering heat, but the shade's helping me out a little bit. A lot of those guys have been living here for years, but what they've done, and I know because I used to work at a school called Nova in the 90s in Osaka when I left Mie Prefecture. And trust me, the money was good. I was making good coin. I was making probably about $4,500 a month US. And I was, you know, I had some good coin in me. And I had a good job. I felt the job was really good, but I always thought that the job was not a career job. And so I left in 97 to go teach in Saudi Arabia. Teach them what I learned, what I did in the Air Force. And I'm glad I did that. And the reason why I did it, because I thought I was going to be working for McDonnell Douglas at the time. And I thought, okay, great, I'm going to be working for a defense contractor, get me a pension and whatnot. But a month after I got into that position, they had gotten bought out by Boeing, and then Boeing had pushed us subcontracted us off to this company called Al Salam Aircraft. And I wasn't happy with that, but I stayed there for 4 years until I left. But the good thing about that whole move is it got me out of Japan at the time. I needed to get out of Japan at 35. And I was, I'm sorry. And I was able to get back into the workforce in the United States and put more into my Social Security pot. Yes. And at the same time, I started investing in, you know, my companies would invest in IRAs for me. Now, so my money was growing through my IRA. You know, that was mainly what I was focused on. But what was really happening too was because I started making more money, that means whenever I go to collect Social Security later, my Social Security money is going to be more. You see, because Social Security is based on, it's maxed at a certain amount, but it's based on what you made throughout your working history, right? What has happened with a lot of these people in Japan who stayed, when they didn't see it coming, but they were working at Nova and these big schools, and then Nova went bankrupt on their ass back in 2006. And guess what? The bottom fell out. Because I remember when I was working at Nova, it was good. Every week they were opening up new schools. They called it Ekimai Ryugaku. In front of every station they had a school. Sometimes they had 2-3 schools. The one of my schools that I taught at, Tennoji, which was my first job at Nova, my first school, they actually had 2 schools in that, right down the street from each other. Yes. And I remember teaching at the one, and then they said, hey, we want to move you over to Mio, the first school they put in the department center. And it worked. It really worked, and everybody was happy about it. And I was one of the first teachers to get on that program. And then I was also one of the first teachers to get onto the NovaNet program, which I was teaching over the internet in 96 with Nova. So that was fun. But like I said, some people, what they do is they overstay their boundaries. And then you have a lot of these young guys coming over here too, like in the early 20s, and girls, they get out of college and they get over here, right? And then they get stuck because the bottom fell out and they weren't putting into their Social Security pot back home. Now I got some friends went back home to, say, New Zealand, Australia, and these places, and they can't get out of there now because they can't make the money now because they have to struggle to find a low-paying job, and then they don't make enough money to be able to come back to Japan because now they're out of the system. And even if they get a job now, teaching English is not the way to go in Japan anymore because they don't pay you as much. I would say that if you are going to teach English, right now, private English schools are not the way to go. The best way to do it is to get on with the public school system, but every year you got to deal with that contract thing. So every year they're going to be renegotiating the contract with us. So basically what happens is these big companies like Interact, which is assistant language teaching programs, they get you there, and whatever they say, hey, you want to work in Saitama, you want to work in Tokyo, whatever you want to work in, right? And I would suggest that you be open-minded where you want to go. That way you have an easier time of getting on the job. But if you're a young 20-something-year-old, do it just for a couple years and get out. And if you love Japan that much, go back to your home country, get you a good paying job, make your investments, your solid investments, let them build up to the point to where you can live comfortably in Japan. And so, like I said, you will not get rich in Japan, but you can get rich in your respective countries, like I did myself. And that's why I moved back, because what I did is I made a lot of money, and I was investing a lot, not only in my retirement accounts, but I was also investing in my own brokerage accounts, right? And so now I'm able to live in Japan on my investments. And I'm here to tell you, you won't get rich in Japan, but you can live in Japan in most places on $1,000 a month. Yes, you can. And you can live well. And I'll give you an example. I'm not going to be in this place too much longer because our house is scheduled to be completed in December. But when we got here last June, we were renting this house, and this house has you can park 3 cars there with a garage. It's a 1,300 square foot old Japanese house, about 50 years old. But guess what? Our rent's only 60,000 yen, which, at any rate is probably between $380 and $400 a month. That's it. That is it. That is it. Now, like I said before, it depends on where you live, of course. I mean, you can still get by in Tokyo for you'll get a much smaller place at 60,000 yen. It's going to be, ferro cement, and, you're going to have to put a lot of things in to keep your butt warm. But still, you're able to live there, right? But if you want to live out here, like where I live in Niigata, you're going to need a car. Yes, you're going to need to drive around because we don't have the best public transportation system in the world. So you're going to need a car out here. So that's why we don't have nowhere near as many people out here. As you can see, look at this park. You don't see a lot of people walking around here, crowded all up. Like if this was in Tokyo, this place would be always inundated with people because these big, beautiful trees and greenery, like Ueno Park, right? You've been to Ueno Park. If you've been to Japan, you've been to Ueno Park, or you've been to Yoyogi Park, and you've seen how that is. So, I just wanted to get this out here. I am going to be doing a lot more videos, just talking to you about what it is like living in Japan. And like I said, I am living proof that you can live well in Japan. I am living well. This is my channel, Black, Sophisticated, and Prosperous. And, I just updated my picture up there because I am BSP and I am living well in Japan. I have a wife and 2 children. I'm getting a home built. I don't have to work. And I think another thing, one last thing I want to say too, is if you can help it, by all means, do not try to work in Japan. Try to live in Japan without having to work. And it will blow your mind. It will be a much better experience for you because they're not paying you that well in Japan. Now, the average Japanese person has not gotten a pay raise in a long time, but Japan is really good at keeping things on the down low. So a lot of people don't even know that they're living amongst bad times because, people are still living. I see people eating well, restaurants are full, I see that. But I also see a lot more tourists doing shopping in high districts like Ginza that I see Japanese when like before. So anyway, this is BSP, Black, Sophisticated, and Prosperous. I will talk to you guys next time. I'm going to be doing a lot more videos here. I don't want to do these videos long because I want you to be able to watch them with interest. And the next time I talk to you will be another topic on Japan and about what I'm going through. This is BSP in Japan. I'm living well.